the story of the wedding at Cana, we know that Jesus does what there? Turns the water into wine. I think we're all pretty much familiar with that story. Non-believers are familiar with the story. They like to reference it. Billy Idol's song, Eyes Without a Face. Remember, there's the turning holy water into wine. You know, I mean, it's all over the place. But do we really know what the story is about? I think we're so familiar with it, sometimes maybe we miss the real meaning of it, right? So there's a wedding in Cana. Mary's already there. Jesus shows up with some disciples. Mom says, hey, they're out of wine. You got to do something about it. Jesus acts like he's not interested. What's that have to do with me, right? Not my time yet. Something that Mary says, does, I don't know, but she somehow persuades Jesus to do something. So there's 6 pots, stone pots, with 20 or 30 gallons of water. He tells the servants what to do. They do it, and somehow wine appears. And the MC, the master of hosts, he's blown away. He says, man, most people bring out the good stuff, and then after everyone is, feeling pretty good, then they bring out the Boone's Farm. But you guys, you brought out the good stuff first. And in all that, it says that Jesus' disciples believed in him. I think this requires a second look. Because there's something we've got to be missing. This idea of water turned into wine suddenly convincing the disciples, the students, the followers, but at that point they believed in him. So Cana, what do we know about Cana? Cana in the Greek means place of reeds. R-E-E-D-S, reeds. To you that may sound like a swampy area. Where do reeds grow? In a swamp. So you're thinking, this is the wrong side of the tracks, this isn't great, but you're thinking like someone in the year 2018. Reeds were very important in the ancient time of Jesus for industry. They made boats out of them, boats that could sail on the Mediterranean. They made roofing materials out of the reeds. Moses was put in a what?
Basket.
A reed basket, right? They used it for baskets for household goods, for storing purposes. They would cut the reeds at a certain angle to dip in pen so that they could write on papyrus, paper that's made from reeds, which is most important to us because some of the most ancient parts of the New Testament are on papyrus. The fragments, when you hear people talk about fragments, or if you have a really hip Bible and it says, MMS, that means manuscript, and it has P51 or whatever, that's a manuscript they found, that's on papyrus. So reeds were very, very important in the Roman Greco world for all kinds of things. So when you hear place of the reeds, don't look too down upon it. So Mary's already there. Jesus gets there. And what do we know about wedding feasts? How long they ran back then? Days. At least a week. So if the wine has run out, I'm guessing this isn't day one. I'm just going to take a guess. So everybody's feeling the party. They're all having a good time. And you might be looking at this story saying, golly, the hosts are embarrassed, right? Have you ever had people over and run out of food? That rarely happens at the Cotton home because when we cook big. But imagine you had someone over for dinner of my proportion size, and the plate came around and everyone got a scoop and there wasn't any left. How would you feel, right? Well, you might be looking at this and say, well, poor guy, he's embarrassed. What you probably don't know is he's in a hot seat. You see, the customs back then were such that if you had a wedding feast, here's the bad part, the whole village legally is entitled to come. So the guy on the wrong side of the political fence that you don't agree with, the guy that stole your goat, whatever, they all get to come And the laws of the land are you have to provide for that period of time. And if you run out, you can get arrested. You can be fined. You can be penalized. So it's not just a point of embarrassment. When the wine runs out, it's a really, really heated issue. And so Mary says, let's do something, and I have no idea why. As I look into the story, it's interesting that John records Mary is already there when Jesus and the disciples show up. So what could that tell us? A, it could be she's a really close friend of the family, and so she wants to be there for the whole thing. In my years of ministry, I have come to like funerals much more than weddings. It's not a morbid thing. You feel like you're ministering to the family, but there is always a crazy mom or an aunt at the wedding that says, this is the way it's... Well, not everyone, guys, okay? All right. But it seems like there's always some aunt or mom or grandma, and, she just, it's like that TV show that used to be Bridezilla, but now it's, that crazy woman relative. So maybe Mary's really invested. Could be. Mary's a good woman, and she shows up and she's helping cook and prepare stuff. I don't know why she's there, but she's there ahead of time, and she's really interested in it. Now's where the story gets interesting to me, though. Mary says, hey, they're out of wine. You need to do something. And check out, look at the end of verse 3. So the mother of Jesus says they have no wine. Verse 4, Jesus said to her, woman, what does that have to do with me? That could sound like an insult. Well, hey, I have nothing to do with this. My hour has not yet come. His mother says to the servants, do whatever he tells you. Now, the traditional view of the phrase, my hour has not yet come, or it's not yet my time, has been viewed in the light that it's not time for him to be arrested, crucified, killed. So the traditional view is, I'm laying low on the radar yet. I'm not ready for people to know who I am yet. Okay? Now there's probably 4 or 5 times that John will use that phrase in his gospel. My hour is not here, it's not my time yet. Some of those clearly relate to time for him to be killed, right? To go to Jerusalem and be crucified. I don't believe that's the case here. I have a different perspective on this idea. My time has not yet come. Now, again, I could be wrong. It could be a reference to the crucifixion. But what's the context of where Jesus is when he says, my time has not yet come? He's in the middle of a party, a feast, a celebration, a banquet. A lot of wine is going around, obviously because they've run out. Isaiah chapter 25, to my knowledge, is the first prediction to what scholars will call the Messianic banquet. And it talks about a time where God will gather his people together, and it's basically a big banquet. And it's a prediction towards end times, where everyone is gathered together in this big feast. Jesus means Joshua, right? Jesus is the Greek name for the Hebrew name Joshua. Joshua means Jehovah saves. Christ is the Greek word for Messiah, and Messiah means anointed. So Christ wasn't his legal last name. I think most of us know that. They didn't go to the yellow pages. Christ. Jesus Christ. There he is. Okay. It wasn't like that. He's Jehovah saves, the anointed one. I think I have another passage that's probably even better. If you have a Bible and you want to flip over to Luke chapter 13. Jesus is kind of comparing what's going to happen to people at the end of time here in this particular paragraph. Luke 13, Let's just pick it up in verse 28. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. When you see, listen, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and all the prophets in the kingdom of God, you yourselves will be cast out. That's one group of people. Verse 29. And people will come from east and west and north and south and recline at the table in the kingdom of God. Again, this Messianic feast, this banquet that Isaiah talks about back in 25, Jesus will reference it a couple of times in the Gospels. Okay, so why am I trying to draw so much attention to this? Go back to John chapter 2. All right, so Jesus says in verse 5, my time has not yet come. If this isn't about preparing a feast, turning the water into wine, and having the richest banquet, then verse 11 doesn't make sense. This, the first of his signs, Jesus did at Cana in Galilee, and it manifests his glory, and his disciples believed in him. Believed in him what? That he's a prophet? Believed in him that he's a miracle worker? Or believed that he's the Messiah? So when Mary says we're out of wine and Jesus says my time's not yet here, I'm not sure that has anything to do with the other references that point to the cross, but it's not my time to have the Messianic feast, the banquet. It's not the end of time yet. I could be wrong, but I think that's where he's going with that. So what about these stone pots? To me, this is really interesting, right? So John records there's how many pots? 6. What do we know about numbers and the Hebrew mentality? We know that 7 is a number for what?
Perfection.
Perfection. What do you think 6 is? Well, think of what's the number of the beast. 666. So imperfection 3 times. 6 is an imperfect number. Right? So we've got these traditions today. If a bride is going to get married, she needs something borrowed, blue, and something
new and
old and something new. Right? So we have these weird superstitious cultures. Imagine you're at a wedding feast and you look around. So what are the pots used for? Well, first of all, stone, this is really bizarre to me, could not become impure ceremonially, religiously. Jewish mindset, if I touch a dead body, I can't go to the temple for 40 days, right? I've got to be cleansed ritually, right? Utensils are the same way, right? So these stone pots, they probably use to dip the utensils in that they're serving at the banquet and to wash their hands in, to be ceremonially clean. Okay? So if it's your daughter's wedding, how many stone pots are you going to have for the guests to be ceremonially clean? You're going to have 7. The wine ran out. Put the pieces together, people. It got wild. One of those pots got smashed because the people were probably. That's the only answer I can find. Because you'd never have 7 as a Jewish person. Or you'd never have 6 as a Jewish person. And the wine ran out. There's filling in the blanks, using your imagination. But on top of that, John says they hold 20 to 30 gallons. Now, I'm no mathematician, but 6 times 30, that's got to be at least 120, 150 gallons. Jesus doesn't say, okay, here's your thimble communion cup. When he makes this happen, it's big. Now the festivities have really peaked. And I know you're saying, well, Craig, it's just grape juice. The Greek language had a word for grape juice that was non-alcoholic, truxi. They had a word for wine, oinos. That's the word that John uses, oinos. Now, the MC would never say, oh, people bring out the good stuff first and then the bad stuff later, if it was just Welch's. Ephesians 5:18, Paul says, don't get drunk with oinos, but be filled with the Spirit. This is wine here. Now, does that mean Jesus is endorsing a lifestyle of drunkenness? No, Absolutely not. Does Jesus seem to have a problem with them enjoying the wedding feast and having some wine? Apparently not. Because he turns it into not just regular wine, but according to the MC, what? The really good stuff here. So, let's not fall into that religious silliness that, it's grape juice. And then that's all the Bible ever talks about. Now, be clear. The Bible condemns drunkenness, a lifestyle of drunkenness. But it certainly doesn't condemn a good glass of wine, even if it's just at your kid's wedding, right? All right. So where does Jesus fit into all of this? He's doing this all behind the scenes. He doesn't go up and hocus pocus, stay in focus. I'm going to make this wine some of the best wine you've ever had. He tells the servants what to do. It's all behind the scenes. Seems disinterested when he talks with Mary, but he comes through. And whose big day is this anyway? Or week, we should say, I guess, in this case. Bride and groom. Wouldn't that have been a great time for Jesus just to step out and say, hey, yo, take it all in. I'm here. I'm your man. He doesn't. He doesn't draw any attention to himself at all. Yeah, there's a point of embarrassment. Yeah, there's a possible law problem. Yeah, there's possible riots on hand. I don't know. But he sets like this example. I don't need credit for this. My disciples, they're going to know. The people who count, they're going to know. I'm going to take the spotlight off the people. They get mad and quit and go home and people don't notice that I turned the water into wine. Look what I did. No one saw it. Not like that at all. So again now, just so you don't forget, the opinion that I'm sharing, why does Jesus use this idea of turning water into wine for his first miracle? To help the disciples recognize he's the Messiah, because in the end of time, it's a big banquet that has a lot of wine and a lot of food. I'm guessing that's why it's his first miracle. But John never uses that word, does he? Read your entire Gospel of John, and he never once uses the word miracle. Yeah. Isn't that crazy? Well, does that mean Jesus didn't do any miracles? No. They all record him turning the 5 fish and the loaves of bread, to feed the 4,000 or 5,000. John chapter 11, there's a stinky guy in the grave, right? Lazarus, come forth. What would you call that? I call that a miracle. John never does. What word does he use instead? Can you remember? This was the first of his that he performs, John said. I don't know what translation you had. Oh, okay. Here we go. Hocus pocus. All right. I need to stay in focus. All right. Oh, here we go. Verse 11. What Jesus did here in Cana of Galilee was the first of his... Isn't that what a miracle really is? What do signs do? Well, Talis, you're a police officer. What happens if we ignore traffic signs?
They get in trouble.
We get a ticket, right?
Yeah.
Occasionally.
Sometimes let people off.
Yeah, some people occasionally. Signs, they tell us when to stop and go and when to yield. The street you're on. Signs direct you towards something. They help inform you, but they're directing you somewhere. And that's what John is saying. In other words, this is a more powerful word than miracle. I could perform a miracle that proved nothing to you other than it entertained you, right? It amazed you. It fascinated you. And at the end of the day, you're no different. Jesus did a lot of miracles that the Pharisees saw, and how convinced were they? Well, they killed him instead. I like that John uses this idea of signs as pointing people in the right direction. Well, I guess in the end of a narrative like this, when I use the word narrative or story, that doesn't mean fiction, right? I mean, this is a biblical story. In the end of a story like this, I guess we have to walk away with the question: And I wrestled with this. Do I give an answer, or do I leave it up to you to think through it? And I thought, well, if I give you an answer, it's going to be like a particular test I took in college. Jimmy Allen was the professor, and it was the book of Acts. And there were 7 possible authors, or no, book of Hebrews, I'm sorry. 7 possible authors for the book of Hebrews. And so it was a fill in the blank, and so he gave the first 6, right? What do you think that does to you when you're taking a test? You're never going to think of that last name. Wait, no, I would have put in this name, right? So if I give you what my answer is, then I think it's going to stall your thinking. So the question that we have to ask at the end of a story like this, I mean, John put it in there for a reason. But we've got to ask, how does this, A, help us know Jesus better? So if you're they'd say, paying attention while I was preaching, the things that we've covered, how does it help me know Jesus better? Because there's something about his character and his person that I'm going to pick up on in the story. And B, maybe more importantly, how does this help me draw closer